Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. I'll begin by expressing our regrets. Council was meeting until just a couple of minutes ago on another meeting. As well, we've been told in the past that council meetings are a little distant, maybe a little bit cold, so we've changed that tonight. We're just testing out this new temperature. Apparently the air conditioning will be fixed by tomorrow. And we might still be here. Mr. Clerk, move us along, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is a presentation. I'd like to invite Mr. Shane Peachman to come forward. He's with the Hyde Creek Watershed Society, and he's here to thank Mayor and Council for a service grant.
Mr. Peachman, sir.
Mayor and Council, on behalf of the Hyde Creek Watershed Society, I would like to personally thank you for your generous service grant in the amount of $10,661 that we received in January. The money was put into a restricted section of our bank account and will only be spent on the 8 items as outlined on our request letter dated October 17th of 2016. I'll go through those items because there's progress on at least 4 of those. And the first is item 1, the predator net. Second here. Okay. The predator net cabling was complete last week, and the new netting will be supplied and installed by mid-June. That's the old one, all kind of torn apart by the winter. The next one will show. Oh. What happened here? Picture's not coming up. Slow. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Item number 2, the larger coho rearing pond. Item 2, the predator net, the new net cabling. What's happening? You want me to push it, or are you going to push it? I'll keep on talking anyways. The predator net cabling was complete last week, and the new netting will be installed by mid-June. You'll see in a minute. Item number 2, the larger coho rearing pond aerator bubbler will be supplied and installed by the end of June. Because I'm controlling all this stuff, I know exactly when this stuff is happening. Item number 3, the larger coho rearing pond recirculation pump will be supplied and installed in July. Item number 4, the replacement cyclone filter has already been installed and supplied, and I think you're going to pull a picture up on that pretty soon? No? Okay, that's all right. But the one that's really good is that, do you want my stick?
So how much did we give you for this net?
Oh, no, there's 8 items. Come on. You're going to really like the last photo because I'm going to get a lot of questions from people coming through the hatchery.
I think we'll like when you get to the last photo here, but...
Oh, you'll get to it.
There we go. Okay, here it comes.
He's making the computer.
Good thing I'm not nervous here. Okay, that's the one you really want to see. But when I go to the replacement canopy cover with the leather and funded by the city of Coquitlam was actually installed on Saturday. So most of the people coming through the hatchery are going to be looking at that and saying, woo, city of Coquitlam funds this whole hatchery. But I actually assured Greg Moore that I would make sure that they explain what you guys have provided and what they have provided.
No, just let them know we did the phone.
That's our trailer. That's our prey trailer before we get our fish on. Anyways, we've received environmental award recognition from Coquitlam in the past, but this is the first time we have actually received any money. Again, thank you. Your fish will be put on our corporate wall right beside the city of Port Coquitlam. This is our corporate wall is anybody that's donated $10,000 and more. So, now, since 62% of our watershed is in Coquitlam and 31% of the members are from Coquitlam, but last year, 59% of the students coming through our learning center were from Coquitlam. This new partnership will be for the benefit of all Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam residents to enjoy for many years to come. I thank you, and you're all welcome to come and visit us anytime you want to. Thanks. Have a good meeting.
However, it's a long trip because it is in Port Coquitlam. Thank you very much to the Hyde Creek Watershed Society for all the work they do for both Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam. It's a river that flows through both of our communities and provides they provide tremendous enhancement to the water course and to the quality of the water, as well as, of course, the rearing of salmon for that watershed, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much to Hyde Creek.
Thank you, Worship. Clearly, the heat in the room has affected the computer, so we'll try and make do and go a little rougher than normal, or we can take a short recess and reboot. So let's
Call a recess. I'm going to suggest we move the meeting out to the Performance Plaza next to Lafarge Lake. It would be beautiful tonight.
and it's got salmon as well.
It's got salmon, exactly. Yeah.
And a tent.
And a breeze.
And quite the legislature type setting.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, we're all back. We'll reconvene. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Worship, and appreciate the moment to fix it. And thanks to Manisha for quick typing.
We were pleased to give you a few minutes before the minutes.
We'd like to show our best. So item 2 concerns the minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, May 15th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, May 15th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee's meeting of Tuesday, April 4th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Chair Zerillo, second by Councillor Reid. Councillor Zerillo.
Wanted to take this opportunity just to mention on page 2 of the minutes, it talks about the update from Community Recreation about the program guide. And I wonder if we could just take this opportunity. The committee was wondering about having some sort of identification around the programs that are accessible. I think it's an opportunity for our Parks and Rec to talk about all of our programs are fully accessible, an opportunity for everyone to take part. So I wonder if, through the chair, if Mr. Aliueva would just like to talk to the point of why we won't see a little button to identify certain programs as being accessible.
Mr. Aliueva, why is the accessibility not as accessible as that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tongue-in-cheek, we obviously are very accessible. I just want to make the point that the goal of Coquitlam Recreation Parks and Culture is to advance accessibility goals and accessibility to all residents of the city of Coquitlam. I think the discussion was very fruitful in this committee. That discussion really highlighted the perceptions of individuals with mobility challenges and how they view access to our recreational services and how they view the guides as they present the entry to those programs. For us, because there's such a wide range of mobility challenges, it's difficult to brand some programs as accessible and some as not as accessible because, in fact, our goal is to make them all accessible. What we're doing instead is we're going to be advertising widely in that document that all abilities for all residents are welcome, and that we'll include language throughout the document and in particular parts of the documents in all our guides that Coquitlam Parks, Recreation and Culture strive to include people of all abilities and programs for programs and services. And in addition to that, we would have them give them access to our staff to when they do the bookings or when they call in. And we have recreational programming staff that can walk them through individual needs and where they can best be accommodated. So our goal is really to advance it on a broad way, and I think that does address the spirit of the discussion at universal accessibility.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 concerns minutes of the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, April 11th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Chair Councillor Hodge, was seconded by Vice Chair Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the review or approval of their 2017 work plan, and the committee's recommendation is that the 2017 Riverview Lands Advisory Committee work plan be approved by council.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item of business arising out of that committee's meeting was discussed under the committee member updates, and the committee ultimately recommended that council write a letter to BC Housing seeking clarification regarding the increasing difficulty for public access to Riverview lands.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hodge.
At the last Riverview Lands Advisory Committee meeting, a member of the Riverview Horticultural Society advised the committee that BC Housing now requires a permit for events, and that the paperwork requires an applicant to state the purpose of the number of attendees, the areas that will be toured, plus pay a guide $50 an hour to be in attendance. I think council may be aware of this, and it was reported in the paper. The society holds many tours on the grounds, and organizers feel this could stop these tours. My concern is that I don't want the burden of additional paperwork for volunteers or a financial burden for community groups to become a barrier that could result in less public access to the grounds. And so the committee felt that this council should be aware of this. There may be some reasons and things that this is taking place, but they felt that as an advisory group they should advise council and request council to send a letter to BC Housing seeking clarification and if there's ways that they could work with the group.
Thank you. This does seem to be a case of if it ain't broke, fix it till it dies. So I will be supportive of that. Any further comment? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously.
Item 6 pertains to the minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, April 25th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Wilson. Councillor Zerillo.
Yeah, I just note the OB business item 2, illegal pesticide use, and I have to say I do see it regularly in the summer months. And I'm just wondering, is there any opportunity to do a little bit of social media reminder to residents around the use of cosmetic pesticide on their grass for the upcoming summer months? Is that possible? Just to remind folks that they can't be using it?
I suspect it is possible, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Mr. Dumont until he's ready to speak. Mr. Dumont.
Thank you very much. I was just waiting to see if anybody else spoke up, but yes, we can do a reminder to the public about the use of cosmetic pesticides.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see it in the community as well. The motion is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is a bylaw for final adoption. It pertains to fourth and final reading of the building partial permit amendment bylaw number 4729. Staff recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to building partial permit amendment bylaw number 4729.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Fourth reading is granted unanimously.
Item 8 pertains to the first staff report of the evening, and it pertains to the proposed citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4742, which is to support the implementation of the Partington Creek Neighbourhood Centre Master Plan. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4742. That in accordance with the Local Government Act, consider bylaw number 4742 in conjunction with the City of Coquitlam 2017 5-year financial plan bylaw, which is 4706, and the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan. That bylaw number 4742 be referred to public hearing. Just like to note for council that the plan is to send this bylaw to the July 10th public hearing, which we have not yet created, but we have a fair number of bylaws for the June public hearing, and we feel a need to split them up, and we're going to report out to council later about proposing an extra public hearing night as we head towards the summer break.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden, I think. And that was not related to the July 10th or the additional public hearing. That's simply to send it to public hearing.
Yes, and we're going to just let you know, it's not going to the end of June because we've got way too many big items going.
Just for clarification, this is the 3 recommendations before us. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Oh, it's not on.
Now it's on.
There you go.
Question for staff.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. To Mr. Fuji or Mr. McIntyre, as this goes to public hearing, there is, and I think we spoke about this before, but there is provision in here for a change of housing choices if we decide that we would like to have more housing choices up in Burke. I think we discussed this before. We were looking for some innovative housing in the village area.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, through the chair. The OCP amendment would certainly provide that range of housing types. This bylaw here, the amendment to the OCP being proposed, would somewhat reduce the village center area, but within that area, providing quite a range of housing and building typology, yes.
Well, I want to check. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do that over again. Call it back. All in favor? Opposed? That's going to public hearing unanimously. Thank you.
Next item, item 9, pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4699, and this is for a proposed subdivision at 3473 Wilkie Avenue and 1238 Burke Mountain Street. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4699. That bylaw number 4699 be referred to public hearing, and again, this is one that we are considering for a July 10th public hearing. 3, that staff be instructed to complete the following items prior to council's consideration of fourth reading, should council grant second and third readings to this bylaw, and that is submission of a subdivision plan to the satisfaction of the approving officer, a watercourse protection development permit to the satisfaction of environmental services, and finally,
before you get to that last item, sorry, Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you very much. Due to potential perceived conflict, this house is in close proximity to mine, so I will be stepping out on this item.
She steps out before it's read. You were saying, Mr. Clerk.
I was waiting for Councillor Asmussen to send up a flare to announce his attendance, but
We got 3AB and C.
moving on from where we left, Watercourse Protection Development Permit to satisfaction of the Environmental Services Officer, and C, finalization of a purchase and sale agreement with the owners of 3473 Wilkie Avenue and the owners of 3472 and 3476 Darwin Avenue with respect to the city-owned property at 1238 Burke Mountain Street to the satisfaction of the General Manager of Strategic Initiatives.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Asmussen has stepped out because he lives nearby and the perception of a possible perception of conflict. Councillor, no discussion? Very good. The question is first reading in a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Quick.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item, item 10, is the zoning amendment bylaw number 4766, and this pertains to properties at 518 and 520 Poirier Street. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4766, and that bylaw number 4766 be referred to public hearing. And 3, that staff be instructed to complete the following items prior to council's consideration of fourth reading, should council grant second and third readings to this bylaw, and that is registration of a restrictive covenant for building design and submission of a subdivision plan to the satisfaction of the approving officer.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, seconded by Councillor Tanner. Councillor Zerrell.
Could I just ask staff, what is the, what are the restrictions for the restrictive covenant? It said for building design, but is there something specific we're concerned about or we're trying to limit?
Mr. Fuji.
Through the chair to Councillor Cirillo, the applicant had over and above the typical statutory public consultation requirements, he sent notices of the proposal to owners and residents close by, within 100 meters of the subject property. And only 6 individuals attended, but what he presented were some illustrative designs of house size, type of houses, and they're documented on page 3 of the report. And so those would form the basis of the design come in. That's part of his getting the support of those fellows or the residents attending a meeting where there was the house design.
So these are restrictions proposed by the applicant, self-inflicted. Yep.
Yeah, we've seen that before. So there were points outlined in the design covenant, but they didn't seem to really outline the external aesthetics of the building. It's more about it would have a garage and it would have certain aspects and it would have a prominent porch and entryway. But it seemed a little bit odd to me that they didn't really talk about what exactly these things were going to look like, why we needed to have this covenant. I mean, every house has, these days, almost every house has a attached garage and a secondary suite. And
Mr. Fuji, is attachment 4 part of the restrictive covenant?
Attachment 4 will be included as part of the RC to give sort of the flavor of the forming character. And just to remind council and for myself that there aren't any development permit requirements, or council's not able to deal with development permits for single-family homes. So this is a voluntary, shall we call it, forming character development permit proposal by the applicant. And in the final adoption report, staff will bring back more details of the design as it evolves through the process.
Okay, so tell me how's the enforcement if it ends up being something totally different? What would the enforcement be, or what would be the consequences if it had this covenant on it, and it ended up being not looking like these ones in attachment 4?
Through the chair to Councillor Cirillo, the design covenant would be reviewed as part of any building permit applications submitted for the houses. So that's the stage at where the vigilance to see that the design guidelines are met.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Okay. First reading, public hearing, and some RCs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you. And I would just note that this, again, is intended to go to a July 10th public hearing.
Thank you.
Item 11 pertains to zoning amendment bylaws number 4771 and 4772. And this is for a property at 1311 Hachey Avenue and 325 Millview Street. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning text amendment bylaw number 4771, first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4772, and that bylaws number 4771 and 4772 be referred to a public hearing. Finally, the staff be instructed to complete the following items prior to council's consideration of fourth reading should council grant second and third readings to the proposed bylaws, and that is submission of a subdivision plan to the satisfaction of the approving officer, submission of a finalized tree survey and statement regarding tree preservation to the satisfaction of urban forestry. C, registration of reciprocal access agreement for the shared walkway between the subject site and the property at 320 Casey Street. And finally, submission of a construction management plan to the satisfaction of the General Manager of Planning and Development.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 12 is for a zoning amendment bylaw number 4765, which is a proposed two-lot subdivision at 912 Stewart Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4765. Bylaw number 4765 be referred to public hearing, and that staff be instructed to complete the following item prior to council's consideration of fourth reading should council grant second and third readings, and that is submission of a subdivision plan to the satisfaction of the approving officer.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Cirillo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Reid.
The next two items, items 13 and 14, I will exclude myself due to a potential conflict on these items, as I have very recently accepted agency for a residential property in the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood, and using an abundance of caution, I will step away from these two items.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. Item 13 is consideration of fourth and final reading to zoning amendment bylaws numbers 4725 and 4726 and housing agreement bylaw number 4761, as well as the development permit authorization for the properties located at 559, 567, 571, 577, and 581 Clarke Road. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4725. Fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4726. Fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam housing agreement bylaw number 4761. And that the signing and sealing of the development permit for the properties on Clarke Road be approved, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Cirillo. Councillor Cirillo.
Well, I just wanted to say to staff, thank you for the discussion around the smoking. And I take note that on page 7, it did say that the group that is going to be in charge of these rentals is going to go ahead and have it in their tenant agreements. So I appreciate that. And I just wanted to add on there another issue that's come forward recently that they may want to consider when you're having conversation with them is the growing of marijuana once it's legalized. I'm aware of at least one location where marijuana plants have gone out onto the deck, and there's a number of folks that are uncomfortable with it, but I can imagine that this will get even more prevalent when marijuana is illegal for consumption and probably growing to some degree. So I just wanted to say that. And last point is I'm interested to hear, I know it's a ways off, but I am interested to hear how this artificial turf is going to work for dogs, because it may be a best practice coming up. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I'll be supporting this. It's one of the most exciting things that's come across our council table here in many, many months, to see a landmark building like this and an associated for-market rental tower with 101 units. I think it's a very exciting day for Coquitlam to be able to see this come to fruition, and in so doing, underline the importance of all the work we did for so many years to develop our housing affordability strategy that it really ends up pointing towards how we can encourage more rental. And as part of that, I was really happy to see that there's some give and take on the parking requirements for the rental building, which I think make a lot of sense, given that the rental building is so close to a SkyTrain station, and some of the younger people who will be living in the rental building or, of course, in the condo building will not have cars, or just one car instead of two, and things like that. So it's great that we've got that flexibility built in. A very exciting time. And I think this would be really, we often look around to different municipalities for different issues to see the municipal scan, what other communities are doing, what the best practices are. And I hope that other municipalities look to the city of Coquitlam to see what our best practices are here, because I think that they'll have a lot to learn. There's a lot of good stuff here. So thanks for that. I have one little question, and that's, I know there was a lot of discussion about the width of the narrow road, and I didn't quite understand the sentence at the bottom of page 2 that reads of the report: the additional 1 meter needed for the required road widening for the narrow road will be secured by a volumetric statutory right-of-way. So, if there is going to be an extra 1 meter, do we now not call this the narrow road? It should be called something else in the final map. And B, what is a volumetric statutory right-of-way? I don't understand what that means. Does anybody have that answer? Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Through the Chair to Councillor O'Neill, volumetric statutory right-of-way was a compromise that staff came up with the applicant to get the additional 1 meter of width on the road, on the surface, but it also gave a 4 foot clearance between the underground and the roadway to make sure that should any services or light poles or street signs that needed to be installed in that area had sufficient depth to be constructed there.
So the 4 foot is greater than what would normally be sought? Is that what
Yes, we felt that was sufficient for that location, yes.
Oh, I see, okay. So now this is no longer the narrow road, it's a regular road. Is that correct, or is it still narrow?
The road standard is narrow road. It's the title of the type of road, yes.
All right, so it's even by growing at a meter, it's still a narrow road.
That is correct.
All right, it's slightly less narrow road. Thanks very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
It's like that compact large home. Yeah. This is the wider narrow road.
That's right. Sounds like...
Okay, stop. Councillor Wilson, please don't sing.
Thanks. I just want to echo Councillor O'Neill's thoughts on how great this project is. I want to thank the proponents and all the partners involved in it. And I'm, really excited about the rental and the good mix of units in the rental. The only question I had was there's a variance on the parking, again, as Councillor O'Neill mentioned. Just wondering how the parking spots in the rental building are going to be distributed to the residents. Is it first come, first serve? Is it you have to pay extra for the parking? Just curious on how that'll happen.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson. Yes, the proponent will be allocating parking on a first-come, first-served basis based on demand, and there will be some additional cost associated to renting those spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I remember the question came up at some point with the proponent and who has other rental buildings and says it works out because some people will deliberately rent a unit that doesn't have a parking space. They have no intention of having a car, and they save money not having to pay for the space that they won't be using. So I actually think it'll work. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you, and I too am going to echo the comments and Councillors O'Neill and Wilson, and congratulate the proponents. This is a really good-looking building, and I think the fact that we're going to see 15 stories of rental building in our city, I think is absolutely spectacular. So I'm thrilled to see that. A couple of quick questions, one for staff for future, but one on this. On page 4, it does speak to the scramble spaces for the commercial and the visitor spaces. I would anticipate we're going to have some time-limited parking in that area, given the proximity to the Coquitlam SkyTrain that we want to ensure it's not being utilized for park and ride. Can you shed any light on that? Through the chair?
Mr. Jordan.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Marsden. The strategy on exactly how those are going to be managed hasn't been broached with the proponents, but I would assume that the visitors of the residential buildings will be required to have parking passes that are allocated, which would allow them for some additional time. And then, given that they'll be commercial, I'm certain that they'll probably be time limited.
Okay, excellent. On page 5, it speaks to an agreement that's underway with Simon Fraser Society for Community Living, some affordable housing, and utilizing the reserve funds. We would like to see that finalized in conjunction with this, but I appreciate there's probably a lot of moving parts on it. Would we anticipate in future applications this type of thing where the proposal's being asked for fourth reading before the finalization of any such housing agreements in the Affordable Housing Fund?
Mr. Jordan.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair to Councillor Marsden again. With this one, because tonight, really what Council's deciding on is to give fourth and final reading to the rezoning bylaw and the development permit that will generate the funds that would be used from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund towards this partnership. So that's one of the reasons we didn't bring it tonight. We noted it so that Council is aware that it is something that the applicant, the city, and Simon Fraser Society has worked together on. However, because tonight's just for the zoning and the development permit, we didn't include it in that package for tonight.
In the future, would we anticipate that we would see them at least appear on the same evening's agenda? I appreciate they are two separate entities and two separate agenda items, but would it be appropriate to have them on the same night, or is that going to be an unrealistic expectation?
Through the chair to Councillor Marsden. In the future, the route that staff have sort of been thinking about to not to have multiple reports is to address these sort of requests as part of the housing agreement report that the council would typically consider prior to the final adoption. So we'll bring the whole package together to council at one time in one report under the housing agreement in subsequent requests such as this.
Okay.
And Your Worship, if I could just add to that, in the bigger picture, we've had discussions recently around trying to get out in front or earlier in the process around the housing affordability component. And so we have those additional resources. We're looking at that. They're working very closely with George's team, so those discussions are happening earlier, and ideally even pre-application, making that matchmaking. So it's our intention to see those ideas developed and be reported out through the process, so the housing agreements could fall in place at the proper time. But having an understanding and working towards those objectives earlier in the process is what we're shooting for.
That's great, and I appreciate that. And I think that's, to Councillor O'Neill's point, I think the work that's been done by past councils and this council in terms of finalizing housing affordability study, and the specific action items I think are very important. So my last request on page 7, it speaks to the financial contributions, and it speaks to $8.6 million in density bonus towards public amenities and the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. I think the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund is something that as a city we should be very proud of, and I would just like us to see in the financial contributions to break out exactly what we're putting in that from each project. I think it's really important as we move forward that every single project, if there's a piece of the density bonus that's going into this housing affordability fund, which it does, I want it to be very clear to the residents on what this city's doing in leading the way and trying to ensure that we're participating in creating non-market housing, and we're putting our money where our mouth is. So if we could ask that be in the financial contributions, I'd appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
And on that last point, we're actually putting the proponents, the developers' money where our mouth is on affordable housing. I think it's several members of council were at a Talitha Kum event on Saturday night, I believe it was, where we acknowledged the partnership of the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund with a not-for-profit charity that is delivering right now and will be able to deliver twice as much when this partnership comes to fruition, services and housing and support for really challenged families, single-parent families, moms who are really recovering and trying to get their lives back. And so there's an action where the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund is really bringing that together. But I think certainly as important, and in many ways more important, the ability of our council and our staff and our community to come together on the incentives, the removing the barriers, the kinds of work that was needed in order to make one of our first really big significant investments in market rental housing, purpose-built market rental housing in many years, in decades. That's been a challenge that the region is now coming to grips with. It's a challenge that very little rental housing was built for decades because of a variety of factors, among them the federal tax policies and such. And now we're, of course, facing that real challenge head on and trying to create as much as possible market rental, purpose-built market rental as replacement for market rental that's at the end of its life. But in this instance, actually, where there was no market rental. This is a strip mall being converted into a market rental tower and a market condo tower, and contributing to a number of amenities in our community and contributing to affordable housing all at the same time. So those are things we should congratulate staff, congratulate council, and congratulate our community on being able to achieve, because they've been long fought. None others. The question is fourth and final, and a development permit. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 14, concerns a temporary protection order, heritage, for a building located at 609 Rochester Avenue. Staff recommendations that council declare the real property situated at 609 Rochester Avenue, as legally described by the parcel identifier number before you, is or may be heritage property. 2, the council hereby orders that the property is subject to a temporary protection order under Section 606 of the Local Government Act, to and including July 28, 2017, being 60 days from the date of this resolution. And 3, the council confirms that no alterations to the property are permitted during the term of the temporary protection order unless the owner first applies for and receives a heritage alteration permit under Section 617 of the Local Government Act.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Towner. I understand that there's been a request to speak to this item. Is there a motion to hear a speaker? Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmundson. This has to pass unanimously. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Unopposed? We'd now ask then for Ann Jones to step forward.
This is Ann Jones. I'm Peter Jones. She asked me to speak for her.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm just going to read because I I did send a letter to the council prior to this, and I don't know whether you've received it yet or not.
We have.
No, you did. Okay.
Thank you.
So basically, this is just reworded. I'm here to speak on behalf of my mother, Ann Jones, with regard to her property at 609 Rochester.
I'm going to ask if you could speak a little louder.
Certainly.
There's people at home that want to hear.
Okay.
And there's people in the room that want to hear it.
With regard to her property at 609 Rochester, she is a community-minded person who volunteers at Dogwood Pavilion and Glen Pine Pavilion. Ann Jones has lived and cared for 609 Rochester Avenue since 1973, almost half of her life, and no longer can live in this house, as over time it has deteriorated to the point of it being onerous for her to manage and is increasingly an uncomfortable environment. She has listed the property for sale and has applied for a demolition permit to facilitate a smooth transition to any potential buyer. What she has in mind there is a realtor has recommended that this would make the property more attractive to a developer. In 2007, without her knowledge, request, or compensation, her house was revised onto the heritage inventory and listed as primary building. At no time has the consultant for the city staff been on the property or the house to make a knowledgeable assessment as to merit. To be considered a primary building, the inventory describes that the building had to have merit architecturally, historically, and contextually. Specifically, the inventory describes the following criteria in 3 areas of merit. Architectural, the building is of interest due to style, material, structure, detail, design, or architect. Historically, there are events, trends, or peoples of civic, provincial, or national interest associated with the building. Contextual, the building exists in conjunction with other historic resources or settings. It is not at all clear to Ann Jones that the house meets any of these 3 criteria. When the information in the inventory is inaccurate with respect to the condition, it does not provide any information with respect to historical owners or significance, and is no longer situated in conjunction with other historical resources or settings. The neighborhood has changed greatly over the past several decades, with many townhouses and other multi-family developments around her. 609 Rochester has been added to and renovated many times over the years. It has not aged well, and is now clear. This is now clearly evident. As noted above, her intent is to pursue the highest and best use of the property. If, however, the city deems the property to be invaluable as to its heritage, she would like to urge you to purchase the property from her at a fair market price. Ann is aware that a contract has been awarded to Don Luxton to prepare a statement of significance. Ann does not consent to having the property placed on a heritage register and is unwilling to have the property designated in any way. She is aware of the provisions for compensation in the Local Government Act, and should the city proceed against her will or with this initiative, she has noted above her intent is to pursue development opportunities of her property at its highest and best use. Ann is pleased that the city initiative of the official community plan amendment is in process and will see increased density in this location, including for 609 Rochester, to ensure that families once again can afford to come back to the community and enjoy its amenities, such as its close proximity to the SkyTrain station. Preparation for 609 Rochester for sale at its anticipated increased density potential is extremely important to Ann. Property rights do prevail in British Columbia. She would like you to recognize her commitment for the past 44 years to this property. In this regard, she would ask that you not invoke an order for temporary protection. To delay her application for even 60 days is too long, as she approaches her 87th year. That's the letter. If you have any questions, her or I would certainly answer them.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to see you. We want to assure you, first off, that if we ever do buy property, I noticed one of the points was fair market value. We always pay fair market value based on highest and best use. It's not based on what it used to be, but rather what it ought to be in its context. And so if it's surrounded by zoning for townhouse, we pay townhouse costs. That's how we do it. So we appreciate your coming out here to speak to us. Thank you. And I've got a list of people that want to address you or ask questions, beginning with Councillor Zarrillo.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out and speaking. It's the first time I've actually seen something like this come through to council. I've got a few questions. My first question is just asking how you, Ms. Jones, or your family were notified that you were going to be, your property would be on tonight's agenda.
I don't know that.
We certainly weren't notified by council. We were notified by city staff to Jonathan Jackson, is that correct?
Yeah. Asked you to come out?
No, he didn't ask us to come out.
Just let you know it was going to be on.
He let us know that this would be on. We were notified on Thursday of last week. So that's why we didn't have the 7 days lead time to actually.
Okay, so you mentioned that in 2007, this property was listed. Is that correct? 2007, this property was listed on the heritage inventory list for the city of Coquitlam?
That's correct, yes.
So I'm just wondering, how did you find out about this 2007 date? Was that something that you've recently found out about, and did that come through recent discussions with the city staff? Or?
I found out about it recently, yes, on the internet. I'm not sure how long my mom has known about it. Did you know about that?
I did know that it had been listed. Sometime. I don't know the dates.
Okay. And when you say you know it was listed, is that when they first did it in 2007, they came to see you?
No one's ever come to see me.
Okay. So that's my next question. We have some, you mentioned that no one has ever been on the property, and we do to do the assessment, but we do have some pictures here. I don't know if you've seen this as part
Those are recent pictures, and as far as we know, no one contacted us about being there.
So I guess I would ask staff where these pictures came from, or
I have no idea
who took the pictures, or how those pictures came to be.
No.
If I could ask staff for that. These are the ones that are in the package.
Well, do you have any questions for the people who are before us? Because you know where the pictures came from. So if you have any questions for them.
Well, I don't, because it's got a whole write-up on it. Millard Heritage, yeah. So there's two sets of pictures. There's the pictures that we have in our package, which don't look like they were taken on the property, but I can't say that for sure. And then we did receive some more pictures today that maybe we could show on the screen by email that look like maybe they were taken on the property. So I want to understand where the pictures are coming from.
Do you have any questions for the people before us? We can get to the other issue if you like, but.
Well, I do have a question, but it relates to authorization for people coming on their property, if they've had authorization of anyone to come on their property. So I think we need to determine first if these pictures were taken on their property or from the.
Well, I can assure you they were taken on the property because I took them, and you know that. So.
I don't know that. That's why I'm asking. So then my question to the proponents, were you aware?
It said so in the email when we sent them.
Were you aware that there was anyone on your property taking pictures?
No. No one has approached us or told us they were on our property or anything to do with our property has been done by this city people or the mayor or anyone else. We were unaware of this at all, any of this.
Of these photographs.
Of these photographs.
That photograph for sure is someone standing in the yard.
So these, I'm sorry, I need to ask staff. So these photographs that were in our package, these are 2007 photographs. I'm thinking they must be 2007 photographs because they came with documentation out of that booklet. So I'm shaking a little bit right now because I'm.
Photograph Are you referring to these photographs?
Those ones, I think, are different from these ones we saw today. And
These ones look like they were taken from the street.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, so I was just confirming. But the mayor's saying that he was on the property.
That one is standing in the yard, for sure.
And what I think I'm hearing you say is you didn't authorize that, so that's trespassing on your property. So I'm not really sure.
Councillor Zerillo,
How to-
Councillor Zerillo,
Yes.
I'd rather you didn't accuse them or make accusations when you're asking them questions. If you want, you know very well, because you've read the email that accompanied the photos, so you're fully aware that where the photos came from.
I'm not fully aware because I did ask, was there authorization for these photos and can we show them tonight? And I never received anything in the past, but I'm going to go take a break because I'm having a little bit of uncomfortableness right now with
Perhaps
knowing.
you didn't read the email where I responded to that.
I didn't see one, no.
Okay,
So I'm going to step away because I am very disturbed about this whole idea that people in the city of Coquitlam may actually have their property, if there's something around their property that comes to council, that somebody may be on their property taking photos. So I'm going to step away and carry on, and I'm going to go take a good drink of water, and I'll be back. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to step in here because your letter said you urged us to consider buying the property. You also are aware that we have before us an application by the city for a temporary pause here, and that is something authorized by the Local Government Act. We are actually authorized by the Local Government Act to regulate demolition, and
Absolutely.
that's council that's authorized, not staff. Council is authorized to regulate demolition. That's in the Local Government Act. I think the suggestion from Councillor Zerillo is we should do that blindly, without that kind of sight unseen sort of a thing, which I find odd because I try not to vote on things that I haven't visited. I did visit your property. You sent a letter. I got it Thursday, the same day that I got the package. Council gets the package. When you say you weren't notified by council, council doesn't notify, staff notify, and staff notified you the same time they notified council that this agenda item was coming today. So that's the normal process, is we find out on Thursday what's on the agenda for today. I got your letter the same day, and I went to the home because there's no phone number in the letter. It doesn't say any contact information. It simply says, Ann Jones at 609 Rochester. So that's the only contact information. So obviously, I suppose I could write a letter to Ann Jones at 609 Rochester, but it says right in the letter that you don't live there anymore, that the home is empty. So I went there and I knocked on the door and I pushed the doorbell, and there was no answer. I did that twice. I took pictures of the house because I was curious about various aspects of it. There was a big development sign out front. Obviously, it's on the internet. The realtor has the property on the internet, so there's obviously an open invitation to come and have a look. You yourself have urged us through the letter to consider buying the property. We don't buy property sight unseen either. So all of that is by way of explanation. There's no prohibition. I don't think you're prohibiting people from coming on the property because there's no signs or anything like that, and I knocked on every door to try to find if anyone was home. So I don't know if you have a problem with me being on the property. Do you? No? Okay. So I'm glad. I just wanted to clear the air there because I don't want there to be some kind of a feeling that anything untoward happened. The intent, obviously, was for both of us to try to figure out what's best moving forward, and I thought all of council was on the same page on that one. I'm going to go to Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here about your concerns. And I want to make sure that you have the full information on this. Now, this is a pause of two months for the city to do an investigation to see the history of this house. But under our heritage bylaw for protecting homes, we allow developers generally to protect that home, keep that home, extra density that they normally would not be able to achieve if they weren't, because it's a way for the city to incentivize developers not to tear down houses, but to save them. And in order to do them, there's costs involved. So what the city, and through Plan Farm can explain this to you, is there's not a loss of development potential. There's an increase in development potential. I don't know if the developer person has explained that to you, but you would actually get more development. There are different developers around here that look to save heritage houses in Coquitlam and keep that history here in Coquitlam, which is important to us because I think out of the 78 homes that were registered, I think there's 35 that are left early on. So a lot of that history is gone. But my point to you right now is I'm just giving you a piece of information for you to take back. And I think we'll deal with this item coming forward, and I have my ideas on this. But I think you should understand and talk with your developer, or maybe there's other developers. I don't know what your situation is in the deal or what you've signed off on. But I just want to make you aware of that issue that when we, and you can talk to Mr. McIntyre through Mayor, through the chair, could Mr. McIntyre better explain than what I am doing right now on the heritage revitalization agreements?
You like, Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Worship. Certainly, welcome to the chambers, and it's bad we could have talked before this, but what Councillor Aspenson said is correct. There's a couple of approaches the city uses. They're based on incentives. Like we realize it's a private property, but there's a heritage building on there. And so what we try to do...
It's not a heritage building. It's not been proven to be a heritage property.
Okay. And that's, I understand where you're coming from on that. Based on our heritage inventory, essentially due to the age of the building, and a windshield survey was done at the time, so there was no on-site inspection or investigation, but there was some checking of city records going back. It is an older building, and like as the councillors point out, we've lost a number of those in the community over the years. In more recent years, though, we've been pretty successful through this HRA, the Heritage Revitalization Agreement process, to either see those buildings retained on a property, sometimes shifted around to make room for other development to fit in there, or to have the building relocated to another site. And so of late, we've been doing pretty well with that and seeing these buildings retained either on site or moved. And through that, there's incentives that are put on the table through additional density on that property or additional density on the relocated site. So this is really all that we're asking for, and I believe there's been probably some preliminary discussion around this, but just to give us another opportunity. We have some contacts. We have parties we've worked with previously that have an interest in heritage buildings. There may be other sites that sites that could receive the building that may make some sense. There may be an opportunity to talk with the developers of this particular site. I understand it's a larger assembly that's being contemplated here, and if it's the size that I've seen, may be potential for it to be shifted over and additional density generated on that property. So that's the intent. That's why we brought the report forward. Under the heritage inventory, it is a Class A building. We only have a handful of those left, and so it's an instance here where we're asking just for one more shot at trying to work out some sort of arrangement to save the building.
Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate that no one's going to be taking away any of the value associated with your property. The intent is to make sure that the value of that property, you're left whole. We're just trying to see whether the home that you've lived in for those many years and maintained for those many years can be saved, is worth saving, first of all, and can be saved. And so that's the only goal here, is not to take away any value. You're going to end up with the value that the property is worth.
Or maybe more.
Yeah, or maybe more. But I commit that that's always been our case, is that we make certain that the property owner is made whole. Okay, I've got two other. I've got Councillor Hodge.
Okay, well, thank you for coming out, and I've received your letter, and in here in the letter you said you've cared for the home, and thank you. I'm sure it's been a privilege to live in this home. It's a beautiful home, certainly from what I've seen from the outside. I haven't been there recently, but when I drive by, I slow down and have a look at it. I think it's a beautiful home. I'm aware of the history of the house, in that it's been on this registry for many years, because I'm a past president of the Heritage Society. The inventory that we refer to is in this book. This is, I think, the second version, and it is an inventory. It's not a registrar of heritage. This city does not do things like you may have read in the newspaper about areas of Vancouver. Certainly, Port Moody and Westminster have heritage protection mechanisms that I think are a lot stronger than what we have here in Coquitlam. Some have felt we should have done more in the past to protect these homes. But we use an incentive base, and we take a philosophy that we want to work with homeowners so that they aren't penalized for having a heritage home. I think it's a privilege to own a heritage home. You mentioned here that actually, well, I'll just go on to say that this is rare. We don't see applications like this coming often. This is, in my time on council, this is the first time this has happened, primarily because before it reaches this stage, the homeowner usually reaches an agreement with a developer, and they find a way to protect that house voluntarily. And I think that's the best for both parties, when we are able to work with a homeowner or a developer and to save that house. And at that time, the heritage designation is put on the house, protecting it for future generations. But as you said, there should be compensation, and we do that compensation in the terms of allowing more density and a lift in the property. And we have a number of homes that we have done that with, and I think quite successfully. The book refers to, or the report says, there are 8 primary homes in this inventory. Just without looking at the book, I'd say I think 5 of the 8 are protected. 3 of them are owned by the city. One was a recent purchase, the Booth Farmhouse, which we purchased. That saved one. Some of them are saved through HRAs. One that's underway right now, the one on Hachey, is underway. There are 3 homes here that are not protected, including yours. And this is a chance to do something in that regard. Homeowners have, in the past, have, as I said, worked with developers. They've seen the value in their heritage homes, and they have worked with our staff and this council to protect these gifts from our past for future generations. And as the mayor alluded to, sometimes we've picked up a house. It's only happened once, but we had a developer who picked up a home in order to save it and moved it to another property. I'm aware of a homeowner that's currently wanting to sell his house, and he has waited 2 years because he's waiting for the right developer to come by to buy that property, move the house off it so he can develop that house. So we have homeowners that are making use of these tools to try to get a win-win for us, both for the homeowner. And I recognize that when people's lives change, a home that may have suited them well for many years and they've enjoyed, now comes a time that you want to move on. But I think we have to look at how do we allow you to do that and still protect something that I think is of interest to the whole city, but it should not be at a cost to you. I think that what we want to do is to find a way that we can create a win-win and make sure that you receive the value. And I think that what this 60 days does is it allows staff to work with you, other developers to come forward to see if there is a way that we can create that win-win for you. As I said, I mentioned that. We do not take the same approach that other cities do. And I think that by just allowing us that 60 days, hopefully we can find a solution that will work for you and for us and protect what I think is a very beautiful home. And I do, once again, thank you for those years that you have looked after that home. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming forward. As everybody has said already, this is not common that we get these types of requests. So a couple questions for yourselves and then for staff as well. Through the process, have you chatted with any of the developers that have done the heritage revitalization agreements in the city? Have you been approached by any where have looked and said, hey, maybe there's a chance where we can preserve the house, relocate it, build some density around it, and to ensure you get a good value? Have you had any dialogue about that?
No.
Okay. Would you be intrigued with dialogue like that, or is this pretty much, it's part of a larger assembly that the advice you're getting is saying it's a better way for you?
The advice we've gotten from our realtor is it's been listed for 2 months now.
Okay.
We've gotten very little interest. They've approached every major developer in the Lower Mainland.
Okay.
And we've had minimal interest and some very low offers. And the opinion of the developers is that they don't want to have to deal with the hassle of a heritage house.
Okay. I appreciate that. So, question for staff. In the report, it speaks about engaging a heritage consultant. Part of that work, would that be obviously looking at exterior of the house for the artistic or the architectural components? Is that also looking to be inside the home and see what's inside the home and any of the elements there? Because we've got some pictures that look like it's obviously been well kept over the years. You note it's not in great shape right now. We've got some pictures that don't have that great detail, so maybe there's some challenges you can't see. Inside we're unaware of. So would there be an expectation that this person would be given access to see what the inside's about and whether or not there's any heritage value remaining?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Marsden. I had it in mind, and it was one of the things I would like to do following the meeting is go meet with Rose and her son and have that conversation. And that would be one of the questions. I got to wait to see what direction comes from Council here around the order. But if there is support to proceed with that, obviously we would appreciate the opportunity to arrange at a mutually convenient time for that consultant to come onto the property and have a look at the building and go through and do that assessment. It would probably just be a couple of hours, but we would obviously want to do that with your cooperation. So that'd be one of the questions I would have for you.
Thank you. So perhaps that dialogue could happen, because I think, again, what appears to be the case is that we've got an older home that 10 years ago a group looked about on behalf of the city and said, you know what, this is one that's unique to the area in terms of its age and some of the components of it. So respect that. I do recall having a conversation with a heritage consultant at one point, and he said, if we don't save the 60-year-old buildings, we can never save the 100-year-old buildings. That's not to say that everyone is worthy of saving because of whatever has happened over the years. But I think we've heard enough over the years that I think it behooves us to at least look at the opportunities to say what can be done. And in my mind, though, it's that fine balance between personal property rights and looking at the home itself, separating it from the personal property and say, is there some way to preserve it, whether there's value in preserving it, whether it be relocating it to another piece to enable you to do what you want to achieve, and that's, get great value for it, or at the same time look and say, it may well be a piece of the past of our city. Obviously, it's been here a long time. So I struggle a little bit with that balance between personal property rights, because I am of the opinion, it's my land, I'm going to do with it what I want, within reason, to our planning friends. But I would really like to see if we could come up with a place where we could get that added certainty to say, you know what, Mrs. Jones, you're right. There's no heritage value remaining in this house. So here's a demolition permit, move on. Or, yes, there is, and we would really like to look at coming up with something that says, let's relocate this to another place so you can move forward with whatever it is you want to do. And I do know of one recently that was relocated in the city, where from Rochester, and it was all over the news as they moved it down the street. But it's my understanding that there was a time period, it had to be done by a certain time, or the house was going to come down, because, time moves on. So I would really hope that we could have seen a situation where there was agreement to take a look at this, to get that information and move forward. Failing that, I struggle with the balance of it. But I think I'm leaning towards, I really want to have that second look and have somebody look and say, is there something else that could be done? So again, I want to respect your rights, but at the same time, there's a piece here that it could be part of our heritage that experts say is worthy of, saving and relocating. So if there's a way in which we can see ourselves clear on that, I would really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll echo those last comments because I'll take it at face value. You use the words urge us to consider purchasing it. Well, I actually am interested. I'm trying to figure out to what exactly is the condition. I've worked with houses like this in the past. The letter suggests that there's more problems in there, but they're not exactly evident on the outside. There's other aspects of the site that are spectacular. The sequoia is absolutely, an 8-foot diameter ancient giant redwood is absolutely magnificent. I want to see us explore the possibilities that the home that you've protected for so many years and done such a great job with might have another life, and at the same time committing 100% to making sure you're kept whole in the value that property is worth. And we recognize the value that the property is worth. So far you've had no interest. I want to solve that for you, and I think the way to do that is if you would commit to opening the door and letting the assessment take place. Let's get a quick answer. Is that okay? Appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to us.
Good to have you here. Mr. Marsden.
So my question now through the chair to staff is, this is before us to give a 60-day. Is, given the dialogue that just happened, is there a manner in which we could hold off on this action to give an opportunity for planning to have a discussion? Or is this a kind of all or nothing? Is it possible to defer this, bring it back at the next council meeting, if a agreement can't be made? I mean, to the mayor's comments, perhaps this is something that there's an opportunity to acquire. Perhaps this is something that, again, some of the work can be done, or the consultant could come in and in the next 2 weeks take a look and say, you know what, there's nothing here, and then we're not delaying them by 60 days. We could just say, okay, let's move forward. Is this an all or nothing? Is there an opportunity for us to say, let's have one more discussion? I think I just heard there might be some openness on the parts of the proponents.
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, the clock's ticking here, and I was pleased to hear like an opening to receptions to what we're saying. It's my intention to go talk with the party following this item, and just to see what follow-up we can arrange. I think the permission for the consultant to go onto the property, into the house, will be like a first sort of key step, but I don't want to presuppose that. They have submitted for the demolition permit application, so this is the tool that we have before us right now. It's a 60-day clock on that, which coincidentally it occurs to me that the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan, we're targeting to have it wrapped up in 60 days too, so it's kind of a convenient association there. I think it would still be, given that obviously they like to proceed with their plans for the property, that's what they spoke to tonight. I think they heard clearly from council and staff on our view. I think the 60-day halt on the demolition permit, that's what we legally need. Staff do not have that authority just to hold that off in advance. So I would suggest the council would consider with the motion at hand here, but we will certainly have that follow-up with them following council's decision.
So a follow-up question to the clerk then. If there's going to be a dialogue, is there a manner in which we could just move this item forward until after item 18, which is the last item, that we perhaps defer it to the end of it, and perhaps Mr. McIntyre has a chance to have a discussion now, and perhaps there's, I'd say it's a question of procedure. Thank you.
It's possible to do it. I don't think that passing the 60-day will change anything, because we, as Mr. McIntyre mentioned, the area plan isn't ready yet. It's still a single-family home, and it's zoned single-family home and designated as single-family home until the area plan changes the potential designation in that neighborhood. But as well, once the assessment, once the appraisal, if you will, is done, then, you know, the things can move actually a lot more quickly. And I would expect that I would urge us to perhaps support this, get it in the works, and let's try to move forward quickly. Although I'm not trying to dissuade you from what you're suggesting. I'm just saying that
I'm asking for a procedural perspective, because my thoughts are I'd much rather be working with the resident towards a solution. And I'll be honest, you know, if the discussion goes and it's like, nope, don't want to flex, don't want to let them in, don't want to do anything, well, then I'm going to land on yes to the 60 days. Sorry, I'm going to, you know, that's where I'm going to land. But I would prefer that we come up with something that's, you know, it's a solution that's been worked out together. But again, that's, so the question was,
Mr. Gilbert,
procedurally can be done.
Procedurally, you can defer the item to the end of the meeting. I think you're just providing a narrow window for a serious discussion to take place. I think there was willingness shown. I think if staff come to the conclusion that it's not going to go a certain direction, I don't think staff is going to automatically wait to the end of the 60 days if there's clarity before that. So I think the windows of time remain through the ability to come back to other meetings. I think moving it to the end of this meeting provides an uncertain and possibly unrealistic period of time in which to engage in that conversation.
Okay, so in that response then, in the event we grant 60 days, but a decision's made at 15 days, the demolition permit could be ordered and issued. It doesn't have to wait till the end of the 60 days if that was the outcome. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, we'll certainly keep council apprised on how we're progressing or not with this matter.
All right, thank you.
So the resolution before us tonight is rescindable or reversible.
Yeah, I think staff would come back with an updated recommendation that would speak to the new facts at hand.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my questions relate to some understanding around private property rights. I understand that this is part of the Local Government Act, but so too is the opportunity to expropriate property, and we don't invoke that until it's desperate measures. So I just want to understand private property rights in regards to any person coming onto a person's property and taking pictures. I want to understand that, because even for myself, I want to understand, are people...
Yeah, I'm going to have to move this in closed then.
Why?
Well, you're asking whether someone that takes pictures has done something wrong. I'm sorry, I'm going to move it into closed so that we can have a discussion that includes the legal aspects of this. Okay?
Well, I'd like a legal opinion of whether it needs...
You can't get a legal opinion in a public meeting. You know that.
Well, I don't agree that it needs to go in closed. It's a regular question. I want to understand. If I own a home in Coquitlam, can anyone come on my property and take pictures?
Councillor Zarrillo, it's a development property. I've been on, I can't think of many development properties I haven't been on, but the question that you posed is a question that would have to be answered by legal counsel that isn't here. So you can pose it, I suppose, but the answer can't come tonight, and you know that.
You keep saying I know stuff. You keep saying I know stuff. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question.
No, but this has been explained before. I'm not trying to be obtuse here. I'm just saying I realize you've got something else that you're going for, but you can't ask that question tonight, and you know that we certainly can't get an answer for that question tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to not. So the question is out there, and we'll get an answer. But I don't appreciate that you know what you're you know what the answer is or whatever your underhanded comments are. This is serious stuff. This is someone's private property, and I want to understand as an elected official how I should handle this or how I shouldn't. I don't feel good about restricting their rights on their private property. I know of another family in the city of Coquitlam that was encouraged to do the heritage revitalization, and they said yes, and it's been a big hardship to them. There's a lot of costs involved. There's a lot of things they need to know that they're not sophisticated enough to know. So I take my job very seriously. Things concern me. I've only been here 4 years. I don't know everything, and this one concerns me. So I would like the answer to that, and then I would also like the answer then to if pictures are taken and they're shared on our email servers, are they viable public records? So those are the questions, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I didn't post them on, just to be clear, they weren't posted on the screen by me. I don't know where they came from, how they got on the screen here and how they got in the public record, because I shared them only with council, as you know. So I'm left with, you have made them, someone has made them public. That wasn't my doing. I would not presume to put their home on the internet, or although it is on the internet, but I wouldn't presume to put their home on the internet of my own accord, or put it on a public council meeting of my own accord.
So we need to have a discussion about this, because then the discussion is why did I even receive an email of this type? So let's move on from that.
Mr. Clerk, how did the photo end up on the screen?
We received a request from Councillor Zerillo to have the photo ready for her inquiry.
Councillor Zerillo asked for it to be made available on the screen. Okay. Okay. Anything else, Councillor Zerillo?
Yes, I do have something else. So I want to let you know that I do see that you sent an email in response at 7:08, which I was already in the council meeting for. So I acknowledge receipt of it, although I have not read it for 7:08. So yeah, I just want to get answers to that, because I'm very concerned that if there's items that come to the city of Coquitlam for us for consideration, that everybody receives the same amount of information, both those externally and internally. And that in this case, I think that we may have not shared information on both sides of the fence. So I'm very uncomfortable with this one, as I shared earlier, and I'll wait for some.
Councillor Zerillo, I'd urge you not to make accusations of
I'm not making
of your
any
colleagues.
accusations. I'm trying to understand something.
You just did, but
What accusation did I
In any
make?
case, my deep apologies that you got the email later than I would have liked. As you know well, my family had a medical.
Again, as I know well. Why do I know this well? You're inside my mind now?
Okay, as you know then, because it was explained to you a few hours ago, my family had a medical crisis today, and I was unable to respond as quickly to your question as I otherwise would have. My deep apologies. Could someone take the chair?
Please, Mayor Stewart.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, where are we at here? We're ready to call for the vote?
I would ask whether Councillor Zerillo is
done.
finished her inquiry.
Thank you.
We have no additional speakers identified in the queue.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The motion passes.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just go grab Councillor Reid.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item on the agenda is item 15. It pertains to the noise regulation construction hours amendment bylaw number 4739. Staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to noise regulation construction hours amendment bylaw number 4739, and that council give first, second, and third readings to bylaw notice enforcement amendment construction noise bylaw number 4778.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Towner. I'll tell you on this one, one of my neighbors is a developer, or rather one of my neighbor's property is being developed. And the last several Sundays he has opted to do work on his property during the construction of the house on a Sunday morning and finish by 9. And so that when the complaints come in, Bylaws hasn't managed to make it to the home on time. I think we've got some, we have to make sure that the development industry is more respectful of our neighborhoods, and that's one of the big challenges, and I applaud council for taking this position as well, but I applaud staff for working through these issues and trying to come to that balance where we can make certain that the development occurs, but also make certain that as much as possible it doesn't drag the neighborhood into the challenges that we've seen, well, we saw this last Sunday morning in my neighborhood. So let's continue to keep them on notice that we're going to protect neighborhoods. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I just also want to say that we have so much construction going on in our city right now, and I find these amendments to the bylaw a good balance between getting the work done but respecting the residents and the neighborhood. And I also want to just commend you and your team for the work you've done on this, your diligence with the Good Neighbor bylaw, getting the word out, educating the builders, and I want to thank you for that, and I'm in full support of these amendments. So.
Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to see this here. I started a while ago about the changing the Sunday rules, and then more often people in different areas of the cities have always talked about the social impact of construction and needing to deal with that in a better way. And I'm glad to see these new noise laws during the week, especially change those times from 10 p.m. down to 8 p.m. I think this will help bring some more peace and bring a better way, because a lot of good developers are always gone by 4 or 5. It's just some of the other ones that extend and cause grief in the neighborhoods. I'm really pleased to see this here for the fourth and final. No, second and third. We'll get fourth and final the next time. But I just say I can't wait to get this done and out there for the public, because it's a good piece of work. I mean, we've been waiting for a long time. We've had a number of issues. Doug Vance, Jim Bontemo, we've dealt and I've talked to them a number of times in our building permits department. And it's an issue that has been plaguing us throughout the city for a while now, as we're a very busy place with lots of construction. So it's good to see. I'll be supporting it, and I will look back when it comes back for fourth and final. Thanks.
Okay, so this is first, second, and third readings of the Noise Regulation Amendment Bylaw on construction hours. You missed the first, that's all. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 16 pertains to capital construction projects update for May 2017. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Strategic Initiatives and a presentation by the Director of Facilities.
Second.
Recommendation is moved by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Ms. Toma. That's just my way of acknowledging that you're speaking. Ms. Toma.
Thank you. I just wanted to introduce the presentation that will be given by our Director of Facilities, Martin Eunice. This is just a summary of all the construction projects that we have undertaken over the last few months. And with the unforeseen weather conditions, we were lucky enough to have completed most of them on time and progress with the rest that are ongoing on time. We do have a request in the report for additional funding for some unforeseen soil conditions, and Martin can explain that a little bit more. But I thank you for the opportunity and whatever questions you have that we can provide answers to. Thank you.
Martin?
Thank you.
A little louder. There we
Sorry.
go. Okay.
Through your worship to council, I want to present this capital construction update. There's a lot of good news in it and some not so good. And I want to commend the mayor on the weather in council chambers. I agree with him. We should do something about it. Sorry.
Sorry. It's your responsibility, technically.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. I was just going to say that we will look into it definitely and try to fix it because I'm sweating too. I start with a small summary about our projects. We have 6 parks projects, 2 building projects underway with a total budget of $19.466 million. We have 3 projects that are substantially complete and are basically in use, and we have 1 building project which is the Poirier Forum after a long while is substantially complete and the system is in place. 2 of the parks projects are underway, and 1, which is the PSLC conversion, is also underway. Of course, the request on the Smiling Creek project, not very smiling in this case. We would like to request from council $250,000 for unforeseen ground conditions. The anticipated surplus on the projects that we have completed is approximately $805,000. The locations of the facilities or the parks, as you can see, the projects and the northeast side of Coquitlam and the southwest side of Coquitlam. The first one that we wanted to present on is Princeton Park. It's located. It's located in the northeast side of Coquitlam. It's about 0.7 acres. It has creative play elements, some passive recreation, and some ground landscape. The approved budget for this project is $906,000. We've added some pictures. The project is substantially complete and is open to the public. It was open in March of 2017, and these are some pictures of the park. And I think it's a beautiful location, and our team had done an excellent job. The second park that I wanted to brief council on or update council on is Victoria Park. It's 3.6. It has also in the northeast side or upper side of Coquitlam, it has a full sand-based sports field with drainage, a picnic area, pathways, landscaping, and a playground area. The approved budget for this project is $1.95 million. Some pictures of Victoria Park. Just to show you the area, our team are very proud of the parks in coordination with PRCS. We have been able to deliver wonderful parks. Rochester Park. This is a park that is 10 acres. It is divided into 3 phases. Phase A is semi-complete. We have 2 pieces of Phase A that is not complete. We did send to council notification in April that we did open it to the public. And the location is at the southwest side of Coquitlam. The approved budget for the whole project is $4.84 million. Thank you, Councilor. Yeah,
responsible for the air conditioning, Dave?
Yeah, definitely. Rochester Park Area A is complete. This is the play structure area. All of this is complete. The area we show, this staircase is not open to the public because it leads down to Area B. And this is the parking lot that is complete and open. We work very closely with the Ecole Middle School in Millardville to deliver this project. It's right beside the school, and they were very accommodating. The work on Phase B of this project, as you can see, is well underway, and we are progressing well, as Andrea mentioned earlier. That the severe weather conditions have delayed us on a couple of projects, but we've been able to keep them on budget as much as we can. We have not exceeded our budgets on our projects that were delayed due to the winter months. Hartley Field is a 1.6 acre field. It's a sand-based sports field with full drainage systems to baseball diamonds. It's about $1.4 million. Hartley Field, a beautiful field. We have had some drainage issues with this field, as council are aware. And our staff with the consulting team and the contractor are looking at this field to address any deficiencies. The park is complete, but we will look at the deficiencies that are hopefully open in the summer. Mountain View Park is a park that is still underway. We have just started. It will have a playground, adult exercise area, a washroom area, and grass and landscaping areas. The approved budget is $1.51 million. Of that, there is $500,000 that came as a federal grant. So we subsidized the project from the federal grant, which is $500,000. A picture of the parking lot where the park is planned to be. Smiling Creek. Smiling Creek is a 3.4 acre full-size sports field with drainage systems and pathways and fencing. The approved budget is 2.8, and this is where we would like to request approval of council of adding $250,000 to our budget. We have encountered, after the winter months, after the excavation, we have encountered a large formation of bedrock that was not anticipated when we first did our let's say, our geotechnical assessment. There were 16 boreholes when we first started. We assessed, we carried, and tried to mitigate the risk with carrying a contingency for the extra rock. After we went in, we found that the rock formation is much larger than we anticipated, and we have to remove it. And hence, we are asking to preserve the project on budget, on schedule, is that we request from council to provide us with an additional $250,000. The Poirier Forum, I heard from several councillors that this project has been delayed a couple of times. We have been able to install the dehumidification system and the enhanced ventilation. If you go to the forum right now, there are a couple of pictures. This is without, and you will see where the ducting is on the left-hand side of the picture, and you will see a unit at the end. And the dehumidification unit will be outside. And just reference to the discussion that happened about the noise and the heat pump, the unit itself will be housed in a soundproof casing, so the sound will not go out and bother anybody. The PSLC expansion, of course, this has been discussed in council. It is the expansion of the change rooms and washrooms and changing the ice curling rink into a skating rink. Of course, this is all scheduled we have started design, but we will not implement until the end of the curling season, of course, as directed by council. Next steps, we would like to request the approval for the $250,000. We have an anticipated $805,000 that are surplus from the 3 projects that we have completed that usually stay in our budgets for 12 months for the warranty period. On some of the projects, if the risk can be mitigated, we can release some of the funding to be used elsewhere on other projects. And we will present another update at the end of this year, updating council on all the projects that we have.
Thank you very much. Of course, you've outlined hundreds of thousands, I think $800,000 in savings, and managed to scrimp and save on lots of budgets. But the email we'll get tomorrow is about the fact that you found some rocks and needed $250,000 on one of them. So,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you for the report. I've been very busy along with your colleagues in Parks, Rec and Culture. Just looking at the report, the first one is you mentioned, you did reference the drainage problem at Hartley Field. We, as councillors, we did receive emails and photos of that, and I know it was a very wet fall, winter, and the report says that has now been delayed. Are we confident that we have a solution there? Is this delay because we actually have something we can do there now, or it seems that our winters are getting wetter, including our springs recently as well. So,
through your worship to Council Hodge, we have our project team with PRCS, our consultant, and the contractor. We are looking at a solution to address the irrigation problem, and we will investigate it. We have delayed the opening until the summer to make sure that we have addressed the deficiency before we let people on it. We will come back to council or send you a memo about Hartley Field when we resolve this problem, but our teams are currently working on a solution.
Great, thank you. Looking at the pictures of the forum, I know that this has been an area of concern in a number of our user groups. Glad to see that it looks like that is now taken care of. I want to thank the user groups for their patience. I know there were a number of groups that were displaced this winter, not as much as the year before, but certainly we apologize to those groups and to the volunteers for that did create some inconvenience, but hopefully we have that problem solved. Looking at the picture, it reminded me of two things. One was that this facility is becoming increasingly popular for pickleball, and I noticed that that's a picture of pickleball in the photo. There was discussions about reconfiguring that to allow for more pickleball courts. Do you know if that happened? Are we expanding the area of play so we can accommodate more pickleball? And I see.
Through your worship, Councillor Hodge, I think.
Yes, if I can, through your worship. Yes, we did already paint the additional lines for the additional courts, so they've already been painted down.
Perfect. And one item that constantly comes up at the user groups meetings is the lines there. When the lines were painted in that facility, they were put down temporarily so that we could see, I guess, what sports or what the configuration would be. The paint comes off. So at some point, are we ready now to look at maybe doing the permanent etching in those lines?
Through your worship to Councillor Hodge, yes, we can. And we will look at it, and we can put the permanent etching. I think the staff have looked at the user groups and how much they're using it and where, and from there the decision will come through a discussion with PRCS with the user groups on how to proceed.
Thank you. I had some questions on Mackin, but I'll wait till that report comes next. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. In Victoria Park, I can't tell from the picture, but I had worked with Mosaic a few years ago, and they donated $12,000 for tot lot equipment. Where is it?
Through your worship to Councillor Reid, I'm sorry, I do not have that information. I can get back to you, Rob.
Mr. Alahueva?
Yes, Worship, I'm trying to recall. Certainly it did come up, and I think the idea was that we were going to try and utilize those pieces in either the new playground or where possible at Victoria or in another location. So I believe some of those pieces have been retained, but we'll have to give you the specific details. I recall the discussion quite
They were like
well.
$2,000, $2,500 a piece, and they bought.
Yeah, we'll get back information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Great report. Love to see the progress on the park, so thank you very much for everything you've done with those. Very happy to see a report that says we've got surpluses on the budget, because I know last year or the year before we were seeing report after report that said this one's a little bit short, this one's a little bit short, and it was the nature of the environment and the construction industry at that particular point in time. So I think staff have sharpened the pencil in the budgeting process, and we see the impacts here. So thank you for that, as well as presentation showing in the same report the surpluses and the ask, much better salesmanship. So I like to see that. No problem with the $250,000 increase. It makes sense. You're putting a park on a mountain and found more rock than you expected. Surprise. So no problem expecting that and supporting it. The one question I did have on page 8 when it's speaking about the Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex, and it speaks about the renovations being done with the change rooms and that. Some initial design work of $200,000 that we've negotiated back to the individuals that did the architectural work at the outset.
That is correct.
So this was a sole source contract.
That is correct.
That we went back. Can you, staff, whether it be finance or whatever, shed any light on our sole sourcing $200,000 without going out for other quotes? Can perhaps you shed some light on where the rules are around that? Or is this within the scope of strategic initiatives or the city manager? Who might have approved this?
Yes, through the chair. Our procurement policy does allow for sole sourcing if we believe that we're going to get the best value through that method of procurement. And the city manager and the general manager of the department do sign off on that. The process that we went through did show evidence that it would be best value in that case because it was the original architect. So that was why it was approved that way.
Okay, so it's the GM and the city manager would have reviewed it and said that this is the way to go. So there's not a dollar limit that
yes,
beyond a certain amount it has to come back to council. I think we had some discussion about that previously, but I think we landed on not.
No, it doesn't come back to council, but the dollar limit for the city manager sign-off is over $100,000.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden. Sorry, Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mix the two up all the time.
Yeah, we're really.
One's got good hair, the other's Brent.
You're dreaming again. The $250,000 on Smiling Creek, I don't have a problem. I mean, a lot of developers on Burke Mountain have run into hard pan when they had the testing done and more rock there than they required. So it's not uncommon. And so, I mean, it's to make that park, make it accessible the way it has to be and functional. The one question I do have is on Mountain View Park. We talked about this before about funding for a paved parking lot, but in here it says it's going to be a gravel parking lot.
So through your worship to Councillor Asmundson, the portion of that park we have reviewed it and it was going to be a gravel through the design. I am if council direct us to I'm not aware that the approval was for a paved parking lot.
Well, we had discussions, I remember, about this in council about wanting to be a paved, and at the time the question was there was no money in the funding to do that. But since we have surpluses in here, I was wondering if you could relook at that, come back to council about, I think there would be a desire to have that parking lot paved in that area. I don't think we can, well, pass this report, but I'd like that's something you to look into, because I do know, Councillor Hodge is nodding there, and I think other people, that we'd had the discussion about why couldn't we pave it. And I remember at the time, I think Councillor Hodge made the question at that time, that it wasn't able,
Mr. Alloway is going to make up an answer. Sorry, he probably has the answer.
Do my best to not make up an answer. In this case, I recall the discussion. Councillor Asmussen's memory is right on the money there. I believe Council did authorize additional funding for that project to have that parking lot paved. So Council has already authorized that.
yeah, because it just says in here gravel parking lot, and that's why I was confused.
The original design was gravel, but Council authorized that when we came back with the subsequent report.
Okay, so
it's going to be paved.
It's going to be paved. Well, that's great, because I was confused by that, so good. That's great news. It's within the scope of the budget then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great report. I'll support it.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for this report. It's wonderful to see a nice summary of the wonderful additions to our city's facilities. And I just want to share with you, me and two of my colleagues, when we were up on Burke Mountain doing a parking assessment, parking challenges tour, we stopped and checked out Princeton Park and jumped on the trampoline. And we talked to some teenagers hanging around there, and there was really good feedback on that. And I also just want to say I live a little bit east of Rochester Park, and it's my son and his friends' favorite place to go now. So the word has spread, and it's a really inviting, fun, new amenity. I do have a question, though. The Poirier Forum is done, and it just seems like it's that building that people love to hate. I spent most of my weekend there, in and out of Poirier and the Forum, going in and out, volunteering, watching games, selling 50/50 tickets. And I was asked if there will be anything done on, it's like a sauna in there, in this heat. I know, I'm asking on behalf of citizens.
Sort of like in council chambers?
The athletes in there playing lacrosse were dying, and so were the parents. Anyways, I'm just asking about the air. Well,
And my answer, through your worship,
Looking
to
forward,
Councillor
years old.
Towner, it is possible, but this structure was built to be uncovered, just a covered area, unheated, like there's no air conditioning in it. If council direct us, we can investigate. But the type of structure we would not recommend in this type of structure unless it's insulated to put any kind of air conditioning or ventilation.
thank you for your answer. That's pretty much word for word what I told this group of parents, so thank you for saying it on the public record for me. Thank you very much.
But I assumed you were going to tell us that you're investigating ways to store the excess heat from the summer until the winter when it's always too cold in that building.
Maybe another system, Mr. Mayor, like this, definitely.
Yes. Figure it out. Yes, it'll work.
Thermonet system.
And we could lend some heat from this building tonight if you could solve that one too, or at least find the person who's responsible. Councillor Towner, yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
With my vote, but I also have no problem with the $250,000 ask.
Here you go. Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Question is only the $250,000 scope increase for the rock blasting. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Dynamite.
Item 17 pertains to the Mackin Park sports field improvements, and it's the final detailed design and budget. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture Services, followed by a presentation by the Park Planning and Design Manager.
Okay. Mr. Aluela.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of introductory comments. On the heels of that previous report, which certainly outlines a whole number of park projects, we've worked with our strategic initiatives colleagues through the design and construction process. This is the 2017 project authorized by Council under our sports field strategy. Today we're looking for Council approval on the final design and the final budget. I have with me Andre Isaacov, who's our Manager of Park Planning and Design, and he does have a brief presentation for Council to explain the components of the field improvements. This is essentially the improvements to the sports fields in Mackin. And just quick comments from my perspective. This project, there's a lot of drainage issues in Mackin, and so a fair amount of the budget is to really deal with the drainage on the north field. It was targeted to be within the scope of the available funding that Council has provided to this program. That's the sports field program. So we had 1.175 is what we have in the current funding envelope, and that's made up of the $775,000 provided by Council for this year and a reserve of $400,000. We have completed some work with the sport users, particularly the CFSA, and that's following our discussion with Council last October on the scope of works. And the scope of works has been adjusted within what's a practical range of improvements in terms of what makes sense. And with a funding strategy to utilize some of the surplus funding on Hartley, which you've heard about just in the previous report, and that will bring this project to 1.35 is the final project budget. So we've highlighted that in the report. With that, I will ask Andre, if Council desires, just to go through a brief presentation on the components of this park project and the timing, as well as the budget.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. So very brief presentation on the Mackin Park and the sport field improvements that we're proposing for the park. Just briefly first for the context, the Mackin Park is a roughly 17-acre destination park located in the heart of Millardville and was originally built in the 1960s. Of course, recently we've been working on making various improvements to the park. The sport field component of the park consists of 4 baseball diamonds, 2 fields, and a cricket pitch. And just an interesting fact, it's the only cricket pitch within the city. Some more pictures, largely of the fields, but also some of the other sports amenities, such as the field house. In terms of the proposed park improvements themselves, number 1, if you just follow along on the graphs there, it is the installation of the field drainage and the rebuilding of the sand layers and the resodding of the north field itself, which, as Raul mentioned, is the biggest challenge with the field is the drainage on the north field. We're also looking at relocating the cricket batting cage. Currently, it's located quite close to the pedestrian pathways, so there's a bit of a concern with the pedestrian safety within the park. We're also proposing to shift and improve the cricket pitch itself, shifting it a little bit, but keeping it largely in the same area, as well as relocating the Mackin East ball diamond and providing new backstop fencing for that backstop as well. And as well, of course, in the area 5 there, resodding the Mackin West ball diamond skinned infields on both ends to allow for better end zones for the football field, for the south field. And the proposed budget for all the works is $1.35 million. And that's all for my short presentation.
Thank you very much. Top marks for the short part. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks very much. And I've got obviously no problem, just lots of congratulations for the plan and looking forward to go ahead. I just want to, a point of clarification here on this is South Football Field, or field number 5. It actually has a name, and it was named in honor of a gentleman, Kevin Chin, who passed away suddenly, a football coach, well loved in the community, and I think we should be calling it by its name, the field. And is there a reason why it's not called, or is that an official name the city has adopted, or is it, does it exist just somewhere else? Certainly the name's on the scoreboard, field. I thought it was called Kevin Chin Field.
Through the chair, I apologize. It is, but for the purposes of the presentation,
okay.
It's referred to as a south field. Typically, it's sometimes it's referred to as a north and south.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just then this can serve to get it on the record that this field is named in honor of a football player, football coach, a well-loved guy in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. In addition to spending my weekend with lacrosse parents, I spent my weekend with soccer parents and baseball parents, and there's quite the buzz out in the community right now, lots of excitement for the improvements down at Mackin. It made me pleasantly surprised that people read the agendas that come out. They're aware that's going on. So I just wanted to say that, and I think it looks fantastic. But I have a question on page 3. It's for the future. It says expand the parking lot by 25 car spaces for 60 to 65 cars. How do you get 60 to 65 cars in 25 spaces?
Sorry, I apologize. And again, through the chair, should have said for the total of 60 to 60. It's the total in the brackets. It's the total. There's existing spaces there.
There's 30 to 30.
To add
okay.
to the current inventory of spaces.
Or
Okay.
they're small cars.
I just wanted clarification, so thank you.
Yeah, we urge people to drive small cars and perhaps motorcycles, and we can fit more in there. Good. I don't know how you drive your kids to the football game on a motorcycle, but I had one question, and that was on the in the middle of page 2. You're talking about the improvements that would be taking place on the Mackin Park on the field side, install field drainage, rebuild sand layer, resod, etc. One of the proposals that came out of years ago from a remarkable engineer that I know was to raise the level of the fields to take in fill. Of course, taking in fill is a very lucrative mechanism, and there are lots of organizations that take in fill to help finance the rest of the project, because the deposit of fill at $200 or $300 a load is a source of revenue, as well as an ability to perhaps make the plane of the surface of the field easier to drain. Was that part of the contemplation at this point?
Through the chair, we did look at, we are working with consulting landscape architects as well as engineers. That has arrived to the plan that's before council currently. But the plan involves actually excavating some of the soils and importing sands that would make sure that the field actually drains, and putting in drain systems to take the water away. So they did look at various options for making sure that the field actually drains, and the recommendation that we received from the consultants is to excavate to a certain depth, bring in sands that would make sure that the field drains, and put in a drainage system to take away the water from the surface.
Okay, no, I get it, as long as it has been considered. I remember when I worked for the Parks Department, and we did ditch witch through the north baseball diamond at above, just north of Spaney Pool in Mundy Park. And after the fact, one of the foremen realized that they probably should have just raised the level of the field for the amount of work that was involved in trenching and installing drainage. Installing drainage and then filling would have been, from his perspective, more cost-effective even without the soil deposit, which these days is a lot more lucrative than it was back then. So, as long as it's been considered. Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Recommendation?
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Towner to improve the field I played soccer on first. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. No.
Item 18 pertains to an application for a brewery lounge endorsement. This is for Mariner Brewing, which will occupy Unit H of 1100 Lansdowne Drive in Coquitlam. Staff recommendation asks Council to, having given consideration to the potential community impacts associated with establishing such a lounge and public comments received, either support the application at the hours presented before you or not support the application. And two, direct that the report speaking to the application be forwarded to the Liquor Control and Licensing branch in order to serve as Council's comments.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Marsden, 1A and 2, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Zerillo.
Yeah, I just had some questions about the differentiation between a brewery with a lounge endorsement versus a pub or a restaurant or a brew pub. And the reason I'm asking is because it seems like we maybe have too many different pots of applications when everybody's really going for the same idea. So I wonder, I looked at this, I'm looking at attachment 1, the application summary, and it says the primary business focus of the proposed lounge is food and beverage. And I was under the understanding that this was a liquor manufacturing outlet. So I guess I'm having some questions around what is the difference between this and a restaurant and pub, and should this just apply to be a restaurant or pub and skip through this lounge because perhaps the next thing could be that they'll ask for entertainment, or that's what's happening in Port Moody. So I just want to understand what's the slippery slope here if there is one, and could this fall into a designation that we already have that would suit it better? I guess I'll ask that to staff. Does it make sense to do it this way, or should we just put it into a pot as a pub or a brew pub or a restaurant?
Mr. George.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Councillor Zerillo. As a refresher from when we did the liquor manufacturing and the liquor policy review, without going too far back, a brewery's primary function is to brew beer and then sell it to its patrons.
Okay, sorry, so can I just stop? I just want to ask, because I'll ask you as I go through, or else so is there a quota minimum that they have to produce? 60% of what they produce has to be distributed outside of their outlet. Like, is there any measurement that says that this is a distribution? Because we might come to the point where they don't distribute anything. They just sell on site.
Well, the manufacturing has to occur on site. And they're right now under a normal manufacturing brewing license, they're allowed to sell 1 12-ounce of beer per person per day. So the lounge endorsement would allow them to sell more than 12 ounces of beer to a person per day. They are also permitted to sell up to 20% of product not manufactured on site. So what many breweries have done is partnered with other local breweries or wineries, or some cideries, to offer some differing product that's not currently manufactured by themselves to kind of increase the choices available to them. But it's still based in that most of their product has to be manufactured on site, whereas a pub has no restrictions on manufacturing anything. They can sell any type of alcohol that's regulated through the province without food requirements and stuff like that. Restaurant has got to be food primary. They do have certain areas which can have a lounge endorsement as well, where some of those restrictions are loosened. But the predominant difference is that a brewery having a lounge endorsement still must manufacture its own product on site.
Okay, for 80% of what it sells.
100%. They're allowed to sell up to 20% of their I think of their cash value of sales from product not manufactured on site.
So then my other question is just around taxes. So is this company paying industrial, commercial, like we know with our restaurants and pubs that they're all paying business, yeah. And I'm just wondering if this looks like an industrial area, and are they paying industrial taxes but really operating as a commercial business?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I'm unaware of that answer.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about was we have a really good...
Second, we can, it looks like Mr. McIntyre is going to take a stab at the last question.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I think this came up during the discussion around this issue some time back. And remember, there's the city zoning, and we may have various commercial zones, industrial zones, and through the liquor licensing review, we allowed for these different liquor establishments in the various zones. Separate from that is the BC Assessment Authority. They have a rate class system where it's a certain class of business or industrial, something that's heavy and light, residential, and so on. So it's what BC Assessment Authority deems to be that property. They go and have a look at what the business operations are. I would suspect, sort of knowing this building on the south side of the Barnett there, and kind of the mix of service commercial type uses by and large, I would imagine most of them are in a business assessment class.
I'm interested in the answer to that one. It can be offline, but I'm just interested on the taxes part. Okay, so we've got a really good, I have to admit, of course, brew pub's a good idea. I mean, we've approved that and we're ready to go, or breweries, liquor manufacturing. But we have some really good precedents happening over in Port Moody, and I'd just like to understand some more information before we go ahead with this. I would like to ask for a deferral for some more information, because I do think that equity is important, equal playing field is important. We have a lot of tax-paying businesses that are in this space, and I want to make sure that we're being fair and equitable to everyone. So I would really love some information around understanding the clientele that uses this sort of establishment, if it's external, if it's internal, if it's additional sales to what would already be happening in our economy, or if we're cannibalizing sales from other areas in our economy. And I'd also like to understand the slippery slope that may be happening. I mean, I saw some advertisement that entertainment was coming to the brew pubs along Brewers Row in Port Moody, which is fine if that's the way they want to go, but I just want to make sure that we're aware of where this brew liquor manufacturing is going, and that we have a really thorough understanding of what the future might look like. So I guess I would like to make a motion that we just defer until we can get some more understanding of what's happening in Port Moody, the pros and cons, and how this will morph over the next 2 years. I think they've been doing it for a few years. I mean, things like adequate parking, adequate bathrooms, how many children are really coming into these things? Is it really a kid-oriented thing, or is it only adults? Like, I'd really like to have a really thorough understanding. If we're going to open a lounge down in this area, do we have kids coming down there? Just all kinds of questions that we could really, really have a really thorough understanding of where we might be going if we allow this lounge. I mean, I just want to make sure that it's all a level playing field, that everyone that is selling alcohol as a pub, a liquor manufacturer, a restaurant, are all jumping through the same hoops and are operating within the same framework. So I don't know if anybody wants to second that, but I certainly would like the information.
Okay, so the motion is to defer until, you said...
Until we get some information from Port Moody around the...
But you also used 2 years as where is this going in 2 years?
Well, no, I'm just saying I think we have 2 years of history from Port Moody. Like, I don't know how long they've been there. I think it's been 2 years, maybe more. But we've got some good history that we could use.
Okay, the motion is to defer. Is there, I don't hear a seconder. Okay, sorry, there's no seconder. I've got Councillor Marsden.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. On the report, it speaks to, on the first page, a designated interior lounge, but attachment 1, the lounge endorsement is a designated interior lounge and/or patio area. So, question for staff: is there intent to have a patio area at this establishment as well, or is it just solely interior lounge?
They have not requested an outdoor patio area at this time. The wording in the application summary is what was permitted in the lounge endorsement, which is interior and patio. However, in this case, the designated area would be interior only, as that was what was requested and what is being considered for licensing.
Okay, that's excellent. I think I think we've talked about this to death with regards to welcoming craft breweries into our city. Thrilled to see this coming forward, and I think this makes sense. My colleague asked questions about the type of clientele that's at these establishments. If you go down to Brewers Row or some of the others, it is a diverse clientele. It's folks that want to get out and enjoy a beverage. Typically find that individuals that want to go to the pub from time to time may choose once a month or every couple of months to go to a craft brewery instead. But I think in my semi-regular visits to local establishments, I've seen a very similar clientele frequent these as the local pubs, and perhaps this type of thing, there's perhaps more responsible behavior going on while people are consuming one of the fine craft beverages. So love to see them coming in, and I will fully support the fact that they can have a lounge endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Mine is similar to Councillor Marsden, so I think we beat this to death last fall, and staff along with it. 45 persons. Does that include if they're going to have an outside patio, is the 45 inclusive? I thought that was one of my issues, if I remember that far back, that they could have like 300 people sitting on an outside patio. I know you want to answer this.
I'm dying to talk more about pubs.
On this particular place, where is the outside patio if there's going to be one? Because if it's going to be
outside. Sorry.
Now we know why you're mayor.
I'm just trying to be helpful.
Oh.
Anything I can do to help.
Yes.
Well, through the chair
quietly.
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, at this time the applicant hasn't applied for any outdoor seating areas. Should they indicate that they want to include an outdoor seating area, the lounge endorsement would not cover that outdoor area. It would be a picnic endorsement. So if they wanted to get a patio license, that would require another referral to council for their consideration.
It becomes a real dog's breakfast then. My problem is on this location, the patio would have to be at the back, wouldn't it? We can't take away the parking in the front.
There is very limited location for where they could have an outdoor seating area.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel my headache coming back. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I'm very excited for this to be coming to Coquitlam, and I'm fully in support of going ahead with the lounge endorsement. I do have a question. I really do try not to ask silly questions. I read the reports. But half of a page of our report talks about the ease of access for cyclists, all the different routes, and it talks about all the ways to get there on your bike. And I just can't help but the practical side of me is wondering, is there any way where to lock them up once you're there? The bikes. I've been in that.
Well, it is the beginning of Bike to Work Week, so yeah. Yes.
Interesting scene of psychopath.
I don't know. Do cyclists worry about that if they're going somewhere? But I don't use my bike to go to craft breweries. But
I think it depends whether they're growlers attached to the bike.
Have a
basket or not.
Yes. If you ride your bike there, is there anywhere to put it? Or four people ride their bikes?
Lots of room out back.
Okay.
Mr. Jarvie.
To be honest, I don't know. We can let the applicant know that, ask them if they'd be willing to include some bike parking on site.
And
I'm not sure we have to do that. I was just curious that we put so much effort on the report outlining all the ways to get there on your bike, and then.
Mr. Gilbert, show restraint.
No, what I would just say is what we do when we receive an application such as this is we go to the various business areas to which it may pertain or touch upon their particular expertise, and this report is woven together based upon their particular feedback. So when we go to engineering, we say what are the travel restrictions or what are the transportation issues involved, and they will speak to the range of things. Because I know in the past council's indicated appropriate interest in is there public transit available in order to minimize certain impacts on the community. Some of the things talking about there in terms of bike trails are future improvements to come. So staff have been asked to say what are the transportation infrastructure available to service this area, and it's not planning and development looking at it from, say, a building permit perspective. Do you have X, do you have Y?
Right. I get it. Great stuff. Thank you.
So a number of months ago, we concluded the longest consultation related to this of any community that I know. We certainly sought out repeatedly the public's opinion on the questions associated with this. So I don't want us to put off this. That was the decision related to how are we going to do these things, and how will they impact other businesses and such. This one simply as an approval of a specific, and our first application establishing a brewery lounge. I'm pleased to support it. I think it's appropriate. I also want to acknowledge, though, that the experience that I have heard from many communities is that the clientele of brew pubs and brew lounge are not the heavy drinkers. They're the same folks that go to a wine tasting in many cases because they're somewhat connoisseurs. They kind of really appreciate trying out different products, and I'm pleased with that side of the industry. That the industry really is maturing in large measure from my perspective, and so I'm pleased to support this. I look to Clarke for a final comment.
Yes, I just wanted to remind or emphasize that it's not the city's job to approve the application, it's to provide commentary and support onto the province as the licensing body. And part of the question that came up is what are the inputs that the city is allowed to consider? And I would just point to page 2 of attachment 1, where it talks about local government consultation and what we're being asked to provide. And it is limited to what is before you.
There you go. Okay. So the question, the motion is 1A and 2. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Zerillo was opposed. The motion carries. Adjournment's been moved by Councillor Asmussen and seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I just want to acknowledge Ramadan commenced on Friday, and for our Muslim community, I want to wish them all Ramadan Mubarak. Today, of course, is International Day of the United Nations Peacekeepers, something that we acknowledge particularly as Canadians, and it's also for our Baha'i community, Ascension of Baha'u'llah, and so I want to acknowledge that community as well. I will now open the floor to questions for our council protocol on tonight's agenda. Are there any questions from the audience on any items on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Any questions? Thank you all for coming.